you. I believe a great speaker in our local midst who lives very close to here. And I came to know him many, many years ago because I produced a television show called Issues Today, the Community Television Forum. And Barry had been on that show when I was co-hosting with Don Wolf, who's the former mayor in in Saratoga. And but prior to that, we came to know Barry because he did numerous speaking engagements throughout Silicon Valley. And Barry is a futurist. And so the sum total of his business career has been packaged into projecting the future and working as a consultant for various companies. And he's a global management consultant, and he's been on Larry King, and he debated Robert Bartley, editor of the Wall Street Journal, some time ago, and was also in the New York Times. And he's written numerous books, and he's a very prolific writer, and we've done some collaboration. And his centerpiece of this discussion today is going to be on future insight. And that's how, whether you're a small business owner, whether you're in an enterprise organization, how you can extrapolate the information that is past to project how the future may be an impact. And as you can see, many companies in Silicon Valley missed that, and they've had various problems. Some of them have done great, some of them have fallen by the wayside. And Gary's going to articulate that. And his other books is The 10 Great Lies That Threaten Western Civilization, The Great Unraveling, America's Deepening Divide, Playing with Dust. And because he's not tired, he's not winded at all, he just recently wrote a book last year that came out, and we have some on hand. He's got some of the books that I've just mentioned, but it's called Brainwashed, America's Cultural Revolution. And it basically looks at some of the issues that have transpired over the last couple of years. And from that, he's been able to put some of that into words, and he's got that book available. But he's going to focus again today on the Future Insight book, which is here, and talk about that. And he also, he's been 45 years in global management consulting, and he was 10 years with SRI. And he's also been a professor for advanced marketing and industrial strategy with the executive MBA program at St. Mary's and University of California, Berkeley. And I'm proud to have been associated with Barry and work with him. He's a great friend and a great mentor. And with that, I bring up Barry Minkin. Did my best.
I'll speak without this in my hand, since I will be using my pointers. Ever since ancient times, people have been, like me, have been trying to profit from prophecy. And we haven't done a great job. Prior to my debate on Larry King Live, the producer asked, "Aren't you fearful of making predictions that are going to go out to millions of people around the world? And, you know, what if they're wrong?" And I said, well, sometimes that's not the worst thing that happens. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, well, for instance, the fellow who predicted that we'd never need more than 64K of memory, that was Bill Gates. He didn't do that. The fellow who said we would never need more than 5 computers in the world was Tom Watson, the founder of IBM. The fellow who said people would not want computers in the home was Ken Olsen of that corporation. And the man who said nobody would want to hear actors talk was Jack Warner of Warner Brothers. So I said, you know, the fact if I screw up, maybe I'll do better than I'm doing now. But, you know, people say, okay, Gary, how do you even know what's happening today, much less what's going to happen in the future? And I said, yeah, no, I do understand. Today's accelerating change is presented by the media in a 24-hour barrage of people, places, and events. Without a framework to fit this information, we experience it as random sound bites. But what I'm going to tell you this afternoon is that much, not all, of what is happening today is neither random nor independent of each other. Indeed, what I'm going to show that there's an underlying pattern throughout for this what seems to be confusion. And if we understand this, we get some handle on the future. And I'm not talking about a distant future that you can blissfully ignore. I'm talking about an imminent future, or what I call a future in sight. So there's an old Eskimo proverb that goes, only the lead dog sees the landscape. So it is with business, government, and individuals. Those that have the keen eyes to see what's happening, and also the fast feet to react, always enjoy strategic advantage over others. And so let me take the mystery, though I have a licensed operator crystal ball, I'm going to take you in behind the wizard's curtain, and together we'll see how does somebody spend 5 decades helping companies all over the world predict the future. This is taking some time here, but let's see if we get that to move again. All right. Why did that happen?
I'm thinking pointing towards your thing. The thing right there.
Oh, I'm so. Oh, no. It usually just does. Okay. Let me try it this way. Okay. We'll use this is why we have the backup. Okay. So the secret. What do I do when a company or somebody comes in? What I say is bring in the usual suspects. These are things that I look at to think about how your company is going to react in the future. I look at demographics. I look at population. I look at age. I look at geography. I look at global economy. I look at who's doing well. What are the income levels? They're all the key players, from multinational corporations, the media, international governments like the UN and other groups doing. Do we have dictators? Do we have inefficient people running the country? What's going on there? Future conflict, what's going to happen in Ukraine or whatever. I look at natural resources and the environment. And I look at science and technology. These are my usual suspects. But the first thing that in all of what's happening of late is exponential versus linear change. Linear change is that bottom line with the squares. Things go on normal, and they have for years. It's in my early experience, people, what we call the quants, were able to predict the future because they just added a percentage point here. Things were pretty straightforward. Then what happens is something called exponential change, and that's explosive. Things move along, we reach something called the knee of the curve, and then things take off. And what's happened in these sectors is exponential change. You have to predict what's in the future. of energy. We're talking about population. As a futurist, my head is full of statistics. I can tell you that the population of the world in 1960 was 6.8. Today it's 7.8. In 2030, it will be 8.5 billion people. In 2050, it will be 10 billion people. And by 2100, be 11.2 billion people. But let me give these so what statistics some meaning. It took 4 million years for the Earth's population to reach 2 billion people. In just 70 years, it has tripled. There's that 4 million years linear growth, 7 years exponential growth. You don't know what's happening. And this is what's also interesting is that 95% of this growth is happening in the developed world, in the developing world, rather. In the developed world, we're still moving along linearly, on a linear track. And to put it another way, for every year till 2050, there'll be enough people put on the earth to populate a country the size of Italy. Or every day, there's enough people put on the earth to populate a city the size of Akron, Ohio, or Newark, New Jersey. This is the biggest piece of the future puzzle. It fills in a big gap. There's no crystal ball. It's all facts and numbers. And when you start filling those things in, you start to get a picture of the future. We'll do it together. Another piece of the puzzle. See that circle? There are more people in that circle than there is in the rest of the world. China and India are in that circle. So where the action's happening, where all the exponential growth is happening, is in that small circle of the world. And of course, that's going to have meaning into our puzzle. What's happening due to this is that you have experienced in your lifetime the largest, and still are, the largest migration in the history of the world. 98 million people have moved just from rural to cities in China alone. And there's some 281 million migrant workers moving around the world. A third of them to Asia, a third of them to Europe, and about a third to the US and Australia. So you've got this amazing movement of people. And so what you have now in over 60 countries, over 15% of the population is alien to that country. All of these people, all of that population, where are they going? They're going into the cities. They're going into the cities all over the world. And so what you have now is about 56% of the whole world lives in an urban environment. That will move to 66% in 2030 and 68% in 2050. So what you're getting is mega cities of over 10 million people. In 1950, there was one city in the world that had over 10 million people, and that was the Big Apple, New York. By 1980, there were 2. Today, there are 37 cities with populations over 10 million, and most of them in the developing world. So, with all of that urban sprawl into a limited area, doesn't take long to predict that you're going to have to build up. And we're seeing that. This is the 135-story Burj Khalifa in Dubai, which has 7 of the 10 largest buildings in the world now. You got to go up. Those are the lucky ones. 1 billion people live in slums like this. That's a quarter of that urban population lives in slums. And that number will double by 2030 if things are not done. There's some things being done in Mexico with satellite cities. In Cairo, you start to see them building out into the desert. But these places are hotbeds of entrepreneurship. These people want to get out. This is an example, somebody in Africa, as long as he's making furniture, he might as well make coffins as well. Get the money, get into that migration, get your ticket, and start moving. This is what's happening. You don't have to predict this is what's going on. You can see where the world is going, and you can say, okay, start to get how you do this. If we had 100 people, and we hopefully should one day in this room, and they were representative of the world, 56 of you would come from Asia. A third of you, 1 out of 3 would be Indian. 16 of you would come from Africa. 13 of you would come from sub-Saharan Africa. Only 13 of you would come from the whole Western Hemisphere. Only 4 from the United States. 7 from Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union. 5 from Western Europe, and 3 from the Middle East. That's the mix. That's what your world is going to look like, and all of the things that relate to that. Also, like all of us, the world will never be younger than it is today. What you're looking at is the red. The red is countries and areas where over 60% of the population is under 30 years old. The pink is where from 45% to 59% of the population is under 30. The light blue is 30 to 44% of the population is under 30. And the dark blue, which is hard to see, but if you look at the 2025 area, is in Europe and Japan, where less than 30% of the population is under 30 years old. And so what this has done, this aging of the population, you start to see, you look at the top, you see more red, and if you look, and you look down and you start to see it getting bluer and older. And what this has done, actually, it's led to a demographic tipping point in the developed world. The ratio between seniors and working age population is growing and will never, and will grow tremendously just during this decade. We'll see this rapid growth. In 2010, there was 4 workers for every senior. By 2025, there will be 3 workers or lower for every senior. And what's happening in places like China, China has 210 million people that are over 65. And so this influence on what's going to happen in China, you can think things like sometimes I have to work for the DOD. What does that mean with this aging population has meanings. So in that case, the UN says China is the fastest aging population in the history of the world. By 2050, 40% of the people in China will be over 60 years old. And in Japan, the problem has existed since 1995. By 2025, there'll be 2 workers for every senior in Japan. And that's an equation that's difficult to compute. Let's talk about the wealth. What do we know about that? If you're looking at what comes out as black is, these are areas where the median, the middle wealth of the population is over $100,000. And we see in there Canada, Iceland, Australia, France, Ireland, and Japan are doing that. Then you see the teal color. You see the United States, you'll see Norway, you'll see Denmark, you'll see Finland, you'll see Spain and Italy. So that's 50 to 99,000. Then you got the turquoise, and you'll see a lot of Europe. You'll see China in there. You'll see Chile in there. You'll see Saudi Arabia, and you'll see Sweden. Now, under that, we're getting to $10,000, less than 10, 9.9. Everything else in the world, the wealth, the median wealth is less than $10,000 a year. And if you look at some of that dark red, that's less than $500 in wealth. You see it in Africa, and interesting, you see it in socialist Venezuela now.
Question?
Yes,
Median is half above and half under.
yes, yes.
So when you have a range of 10,000 to 49.9 thousand, where's the actual true median? Because that's
The middle is falling in that range. That's all it's saying.
okay.
Yeah.
There's no actual. True
No,
median.
there's no actual number for that, but it's falling within that range. It's a good question. Okay, so what does that do? It's easy to see. With that difference, you're going to have class warfare, and we're having more and more of it happening all over. We put it this way: if you're making if you have wealth of $738,000, you are in that infamous 1% of the population in the U.S. But if you have wealth of $34,000, you're in the top 1% of the world. So anyone with that is the top 1% of the world if you have that. So what we have going on is middle class expansion. If you're making $10 to $20 a day, you're now middle class in the world. The action, again, not happening in the developed world. The middle class is growing. It's all in that circle, China and Asia, which that middle class is growing, has a lot of influence in what's going to be happening in the world. North America, again, linear. Asia, exponential change. Limited hope, unfortunately, for sub-Saharan Africa. All of this change happening, people getting out, but trouble.
John, what's your read? I know I don't want to mess you up. A quick question on when you say limited hope, as much money the world has pumped billions of dollars into sub-Saharan Africa and the continent in general. What's the reason, and that may be a little bit longer to answer, why we can't seem to get some entrepreneurialism going? There is some, but
yeah, there is something. What happens is people who have it, if you have a skill or secondary or tertiary education, you're running because everybody else wants you.
Yeah.
And so you get the chance to get out. So it's nobody wants to play in that playground.
Is it more about like the mining in terms of let's get out there and go get natural resources? And no one's willing to train the non-skilled workforce?
Well, the resources are being controlled by China.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So they're buying up all of these countries basically.
Yeah.
And they're becoming satellites and providers.
Yeah.
Brazil is another one where the resources are to feed the Chinese basically.
But we don't want to spend the money to train their workforce? to get skilled labor in there to do manufacturing and what India is doing?
Yeah, but they're doing it elsewhere, is what my point is. Yeah. They're getting trained in these countries that are trained on energy use. So again, half of the energy is being used by the circle and will through 2035. So there's where your energy. Fossil fuels, with all the talk about renewables, will just go down from 82% to 78% by 2040. Renewables will go up 15 to 20%. Nuclear, basically in China, from 5 to 5.5%. So oil and natural gas will be 55% of global use today. So even by 2040, it will still be over 50%.
Barry, one quick question on that. They seem to be, at least here, pushing more for the renewables and trying to push away from the fossil fuels. But that does seem, in terms of the economics, it defies the real costs. You know, when you've got a cost, your per barrel cost is at $100 a barrel.
Right.
You're trying to drive that up so that the cost of renewables goes down. But I mean,
Yeah,
it's going to cost a lot more for energy either way.
Exactly. It's a lot of talk, a lot of the publicity, but the reality is, you know, where that energy is being used and over there. I do a talk on the environment, and to see that most of the pollution and everything else is coming right out of China. 90% of that pollution is coming out of energy generation by coal in China. That's affecting all this talk about what you can do for climate here.
Is it really fair? Is it really fair for us to have sent all of our dirty manufacturing to China and South Korea and get rid of it here, dump it on them, and then expect them to be clean as we are getting clean, but we're not doing anything. We're not doing it in dirty manufacturing that needs to be done. Not with electricity in the world. 9 to 12 and by 5 and
I want pollution in the world, and I know that China is producing 10.8 billion gigatons, billion metric tons of pollution is coming out of China. The U.S., Europe is doing 3 gigatons. The U.S. is doing 4 gigatons, and China is doing 10.8. And 95% of that 10.8 is just from producing energy for their energy grid from fuel. There's the area. And then I'm told that China is going to solve that problem by 2060. So when I turn down my thermostat, it's time to get real. Know where the problem is, deal where the problem is. Let me just, I'm almost finished. Sorry, and I'll take questions. Sorry. Okay. One of the resource areas that bothers me most is fresh water. Agriculture uses 70% of the fresh water. 40% of world grain is produced on agricultural land that requires irrigation. So what's happening when you're shipping grain out, you're really shipping water. So stay with me on this one. It takes 1,000 tons of water to produce 1 ton of grain. The U.S. exports 90 million tons of grain each year. That's the equivalent to 90 billion tons of water that we're shipping out in that range. To give again some perspective, which I like to do, the annual the Missouri River is 68 billion tons. So we're shipping out more water than the Missouri River comes in grain. And in these areas, China and in India, the water table is dropping 3 to 10 feet per year. And that's why you see China doing a lot of buying of US agricultural land. They know where this is going. We're not thinking future. We think short term. They see the big picture, what's happening here. Okay, my battery is running low.
May I ask a question, please, about what you've just said? The 1 ton of grain, how many people does that feed? Because if you didn't grow food, what would be a better option if you're not growing food for the billions of people that we know are coming down the pipe? I don't believe that putting a farm animal on that same land would feed the same number of people. So if the choice is not to grow food, what are you suggesting?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. If you're asking basically, is it better to be vegan than to go through cattle, which is a more inefficient use of the water supply? The point is that with this growth, with those many people, you're going to have a problem with that, with water, no matter what you do. But let me just quickly on some of the technologies that might help. The Internet of Things is interesting to me. This is basically a computer concept that says that everyday physical objects could be attached to the web and to be able to identify themselves with tags. So if I'm a street light and I'm in a slum area and I'm broken, I can report to the internet, to an energy, to a utility company, gee, my light is out. And this will not only go that I keep records of this onto the internet and get data, but it will also actually go to somebody's computer who's a driver, who has that territory and will order that part, that go to the parts dealer. All these pieces could come together. It's used basically, it's referring to tags such as electronic magnetic sensors that could be also wireless, or these QR codes. This is going to be a very big thing. And when you start to get, rather than just a physical object, when you have all of these objects sort of interacting and you're getting this data, you have what we call ambient knowledge, knowledge of what's happening on the outside. So nanotechnology, I'll get to in a minute here, and 3D printing. But let's just say on the computer thing, this is what, when 4 years before I started at SRI, this is the World Wide Web. These 4 companies, no Al Gore there either, by the way. So this is what it looked like then. And now let's talk about how fast things have been changing. It took 38 years for the radio to reach 50 million users. TV 13 years, PC 16 years, the internet only 4 years. So from that picture, a couple of years before I was at SRI to today, where almost 60% of the world is on the internet. There's your exponential explosions. One of the areas that is beyond human comprehension to me is nanotechnology. What you're looking at is a double-walled carbon filament. This carbon filament is 1/10,000th the width of a human hair. So this is, and already this these filaments, these what are called nanotubes, are already called one of the most versatile materials ever discovered. They're 100 times stronger than steel, 1/6 as dense. They're a better conductor of electricity than copper, and they can be used as a substitute for silicon in chips. And they've been proposed for all sorts of strange things, from an elevator cable that's able to pull a payload from Earth to the space station to computers as small as human cells. Lastly, 3D printing, or what's called additive printing, which gives us the opportunity to get high quality items for quantities as small as a single unit. They can use over 1,000 different types of material, from ceramics to metals, to one company in San Diego who's making human tissue out of this. And this is a building in Dubai that was built in weeks by a 30-foot 3D printer and 3 people. 2,000-foot building. And so this is the temporary quarters of what they call the museum of the future. So, I mean, where do I, who was my mentor? I'm glad to hear Frank thinks I'm his. He's my buddy forever. But here's who I listen to. Yogi Berra, who said, "The future ain't what it used to be." Thank you.
Okay, so we can take questions. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay.
So any more questions?
Hey, what's up? Talking over there. I go into the restroom. This other guy comes into the restroom, starts talking to me, and I said I'm only 40% further than the reservation.
Okay.
All the reservation number available was the one I made for dinner last week.
Okay. Okay, Frank? Yeah.
Was during World War II. Remember that whole thing?
Yeah, no, that was big.
Oh, was it cute? I love it.
Well,